The little bell over the door chimed softly as Maya stepped into the small-town convenience store. She'd been living in this quiet southern town for a few months now, trying to make the best of relocating after her husband's latest deployment ended. He was finally home, and they had chosen this town because it promised peace, distance from war, and a slower life. Maya, with her warm smile and gentle voice, carried herself with quiet dignity wherever she went. Today she only needed some simple groceries, bread, milk, and a few snacks for her kids. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt it. That heavy silence, that shift in atmosphere. She, grown used to it here, people staring a second too long, whispers that followed her out of shops, a certain stiffness in smiles that weren't really smiles at all. She was a black woman in a town that wasn't quite ready to see her as just another neighbor. The man behind the counter barely looked up as she walked in. He was in his late 50s, with thinning gray hair, a beer belly pushing against a stained apron, and a permanent frown etched into his face. His name tag read Tom. Maya moved calmly, ignoring the stares, and picked up what she needed. As she approached the counter, Tom finally lifted his head. His eyes scanned her face, then her skin, and the faint scowl deepened. "We don't serve your kind here," he said flatly, his voice cutting through the quiet of the shop. Maya froze. She'd heard stories, whispers from the neighbors who pretended to be kind but often revealed their opinions in subtle digs. But she hadn't expected it to come so openly, so boldly. "Excuse me," she asked, her voice calm but carrying an edge. "You heard me," Tom spat. "Put those things back and get out of my store. Don't make me repeat myself." Her chest tightened, but she didn't allow herself to look shaken. She faced this kind of ugliness before. She had grown up with it. She knew better than to show him her fear. Slowly, she set the bread and milk on the counter and took a deep breath. "I'll remember this," she said quietly, her tone calm but full of weight. Tom smirked. "Good, then you'll remember not to come back." Maya turned on her heel and walked out, holding her head high, though inside, her heart pounded with both anger and sadness. She wanted so badly for this town to be different, for her family to finally find a place they could breathe freely. As she walked back home, her mind wrestled with what had just happened. Should she tell her husband? Should she just swallow it as she had been taught so many times before? But she knew Marcus. He wasn't a man who let things slide, not when it came to his family. He had served his country for years, sacrificed his body and mind as a Marine sniper, and he carried that sense of justice with him everywhere. By the time she walked through their front door, Marcus was at the kitchen table, polishing an old rifle he kept for hunting trips. His broad shoulders tensed the moment he saw her face. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. Maya tried to brush it off at first, but Marcus wasn't the kind of man you could hide things from. She told him, word by word, what had happened inside the store. She spoke calmly, but her voice cracked at the end. Marcus leaned back, his jaw tightening. His dark eyes hardened, and the room seemed to fill with his silence. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. Maya had seen that look before, when he was in combat, when he was faced with threats. "He told you what?" Marcus asked, his tone controlled but heavy with restrained fury. "That he doesn't serve my kind," Maya whispered. Marcus stood slowly, every movement deliberate. He wasn't impulsive. He never had been. He had learned patience on battlefields where one wrong move could mean death. But there was something inside him that snapped whenever someone disrespected Maya. "You shouldn't go back there," she said quickly, placing a hand on his arm. "Please, Marcus, I just want peace." He looked down at her, softening for a moment. "And you'll have it," he said, his voice steady. "But not at the cost of letting a man treat you like you're less than what you are, not while I'm here." That night Marcus didn't sleep much. He sat on the porch, watching the quiet street, his mind replaying Maya's words over and over. The Marine inside him, the protector, couldn't just let it go. This wasn't just about groceries or a single insult. It was about respect, about dignity, about the kind of life his wife and kids were supposed to have in this so-called peaceful town. The next morning, Marcus rose early. He dressed not in his uniform but in simple jeans and a dark t-shirt. Yet his posture, his stance, carried the same presence he had in combat. When he stepped outside, the neighbors who caught sight of him felt it, that quiet, commanding energy of a man who had faced death and walked away from it. As he headed down the road toward the store, the air seemed to grow heavier. Marcus wasn't going for violence. That wasn't his way. But he was going to make sure Tom understood exactly who he had insulted and who he was dealing with. The bell above the store door rang again the next morning, and Tom glanced up with the same casual disinterest he gave most customers. But when his eyes landed on the tall man who entered, his gut instinct told him this wasn't just another shopper. Marcus filled the doorway. He wasn't wearing anything flashy, just a plain t-shirt that clung to his solid frame, jeans, and boots, but something about his presence made the air in the store grow tense. His calm, deliberate stride carried the weight of authority. Years of discipline and combat training followed him into every room, even now. Tom shifted behind the counter, forcing a smirk. "What can I do for you?" he asked, his tone falsely polite, though his eyes flickered nervously. Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked slowly toward the counter, stopping just close enough that Tom could feel the gravity of his gaze. Marcus's dark eyes bored into him, not wild, not angry, but steady, controlled, the kind of look that unsettled even the toughest men. "You told my wife you don't serve her kind," Marcus said evenly, his voice low, calm, and without hesitation. Tom's smirk faltered. He gripped the edge of the counter. "Listen, I don't want trouble, it's just how things are around here. Folks don't." Marcus cut him off with a single shake of his head. "Don't," he said firmly. Tom swallowed, suddenly feeling as if the walls of his little shop had closed in. "I don't mean nothing by it, just it's my store. I make the rules." "You made a mistake," Marcus replied, his voice calm but heavy with something Tom couldn't quite name. "You disrespected my wife, and when you disrespect her, you disrespect me." Tom tried to muster some courage, straightening his back. "Look, I don't know who you think you are, but around here—" "I'm a United States Marine," Marcus interrupted, his tone sharper now, cutting through Tom's words like a blade. "I've spent years in deserts and mountains protecting people who didn't look like me, who didn't even speak my language. I've carried brothers home in body bags, fought men who'd slit your throat without blinking, and I did it so you could sit here safe in your little store. And you're telling me you can't sell bread and milk to the woman I love." The store fell silent, the words hanging in the air like a storm about to break. Tom's mouth opened, but nothing came out. He could feel Marcus's presence pressing down on him, not with violence but with an authority that demanded respect. "Here, what's going to happen," Marcus continued, his voice even but unrelenting. "You're going to serve my wife the same way you serve everyone else who walks through that door. You don't have to like her. You don't have to like me, but you will not disrespect her again. Do you understand?" Tom's face turned pale. He looked into Marcus's eyes and realized this wasn't just some angry husband looking for a fight. This was a man who had stared death in the face, who carried the weight of war on his shoulders, and who meant every word he said. I understand," Tom muttered, his voice barely audible. Marcus leaned in slightly, his tone soft but lethal in its calmness. "Good, because if you don't, you'll find out what it really means when someone like me comes back for a second visit." For the first time in years, Tom felt genuinely afraid, not of fists, not of weapons, but of the quiet, unwavering certainty in Marcus's voice. Without another word, Marcus stepped back and turned to leave. The bell rang again as he walked out, and Tom stood frozen behind the counter, his hands trembling slightly. Outside, Marcus didn't look back. He didn't need to. The message had been delivered, but deep down he knew men like Tom rarely changed overnight. Hatred and ignorance ran deeper than fear. This wasn't just about one store. It was about a whole town watching, waiting to see what Marcus would do next. By the time he got home, Maya was standing by the window, her arms crossed. She had seen him walk down the road and knew exactly where he was headed. "What did you say to him?" she asked, worry flickering in her eyes. Marcus kissed her forehead gently before answering. "I said enough." But Maya wasn't satisfied. She looked into his eyes, searching. "Marcus, I don't want this turning into something bigger. You know how this town is. They'll turn it on us." "I know," he said quietly, his hand resting on her cheek. "But I won't let anyone make you feel small. Not while I'm here. Not ever." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a knock came at their door. Marcus opened it to find a neighbor, an older black man named Harold, who had lived in the town his whole life. His eyes were tired, his shoulders stooped, but there was something urgent in his voice. "Son," Harold said softly, "I heard what you did at Tom's store. Folks are talking. Some are saying you put him in his place. Others do like it one bit." Marcus's jaw tightened. He had expected as much. "They're not used to men standing up around here," Harold continued. "You've stirred something, be careful." Marcus nodded. "I didn't come here to stir trouble, but I won't let them walk over my family." Harold gave him a long look, then sighed. "Then you better be ready, son, because trouble has a way of finding men like you." The whispers spread faster than fire in dry grass. By the next day, everyone in town seemed to know what had happened at Tom's store. Some told the story with a kind of satisfaction. Finally, someone had stood up to Tom and his narrow-minded ways. Others told it with anger, twisting the truth, painting Marcus as a dangerous outsider who threatened an old man in his own shop. When Maya went to pick her kids up from school, she noticed the looks. Parents whispering on the sidelines, teachers avoiding her eyes, and even the children catching wind of things they didn't fully understand but repeated anyway. "Is it true your daddy's scary?" one boy asked her son. "My mom said he's dangerous." Her son clenched his fists, ready to argue, but Maya put her hand on his shoulder, shaking her head. She knew this was only the beginning. That evening, Marcus sat at the kitchen table again, silent, his jaw tight. He listened as Maya told him what the kids had faced, and his chest burned with anger. He hated that his family always bore the weight of other people's ignorance. He had fought wars overseas only to come home and find a quieter, more poisonous war waiting here. "They'll try to break us down," Maya said, her voice heavy. "That's what they do here. You stand tall, they find ways to tear you apart." Marcus reached across the table, holding her hand firmly. "Then we stand taller. If I let them scare us, if I let them make us small, then I didn't just fight those battles out there for nothing. I'd be losing the one that matters most." But even as he said the words, he knew Harold's warning wasn't just empty talk. That night, as Marcus sat on the porch, sipping his coffee, headlights swept across the front yard. A pickup truck slowed in front of the house, and for a moment it idled there, the engine growling. Marcus's sharp eyes caught the outline of two men inside, both watching the house. Then the truck revved and pulled away, spitting dust down the road. Maya stepped out onto the porch, arms wrapped around herself. "They're watching us now, aren't they?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, let them watch." The next morning, when Marcus went into town, he could feel it, the stares, the deliberate way conversation stopped when he entered a room, the cold distance. But he also noticed something else. Not everyone avoided him. Some of the town's quieter residents, the ones who rarely spoke, gave him small nods. A woman at the bakery slipped an extra loaf of bread into his bag without a word. A young man at the gas station told him quietly, "Good on you, sir." Been waiting years for someone to put Tom in his place. There was division now. Lines being drawn in a town that had always pretended its divisions didn't exist. Later that day, as Marcus walked back past the hardware store, Harold was waiting for him on the sidewalk, leaning on his cane. "They're meeting tonight," Harold said softly. "Who?" Marcus asked. "The ones who don't like what you did. Men who have been running this town in the shadows for years. They don't take kindly to someone stepping out of line. Harold's voice grew lower. I've seen it before. They'll try to scare you. They'll want to put you back in your place. Marcus's lips tightened into a thin line. I don't scare easy. I know you don't, Harold replied, his eyes filled with something between admiration and sorrow. But be smart. Don't give them an excuse. They'll twist anything you do. Marcus nodded, but his mind was already working. He wasn't about to cower. That night, as he sat with Maya on the couch, he told her everything Harold had said. She listened silently, her fingers gripping his arm. Marcus, promise me you won't go looking for a fight, she whispered. He looked into her eyes, his own steady. I don't need to look for one. If it comes to our door, I'll be ready. The knock came sooner than either of them expected. Just past midnight, the sound of fists rapping hard on wood jolted them both awake. Marcus rose immediately, instincts sharp, his hand automatically reaching for the pistol he kept in the nightstand. Maya followed him, fear tightening her chest. When Marcus opened the door, 3 men stood on the porch. Tom was one of them, his face pale but hardened with false bravado. Beside him stood 2 others, men Marcus recognized from town, one of them with a smug grin and the other clutching a baseball bat loosely at his side. We need to talk, Tom said, though his voice quivered ever so slightly. Marcus didn't flinch. He stood tall in the doorway, his presence filling it like a wall. Then talk. The man with the bat shifted. You think you can come into this town and tell us how to live, threaten good folks who built this place? You don't belong here. Marcus's eyes narrowed, his voice low and steady. My family belongs wherever we choose to live. I didn't threaten anyone. I told Tom the truth. You don't get to decide my wife's worth or mine. The smug one sneered. You think just cause you were some soldier, people are supposed to bow down to you. Marcus's voice dropped to a deadly calm. I don't want anyone bowing down to me, but you're damn sure not going to step on us either. A tense silence stretched across the porch. The night air was thick, cicadas buzzing in the distance, but here everything felt still. Finally, Tom spoke, his voice quieter now, as if realizing the weight of what he had started. You'd be smart to leave, son. Folks around here, they don't forget. They don't forgive. Marcus leaned forward just enough that Tom could see the fire in his eyes. Then, let them remember me as the man who didn't back down. The men exchanged uneasy glances, clearly expecting Marcus to yell, to threaten, maybe even to swing. But his calm, unflinching presence was worse. It left them unsettled, without the satisfaction of fear they could exploit. After a long moment, they turned and walked back to the truck, muttering under their breath. The engine roared to life, and the taillights disappeared into the dark. Maya stood behind Marcus, her hand on his back. It's only going to get harder from here, she whispered. I know, Marcus said, his gaze fixed on the empty road. But they don't know me yet. They think I'll fold. They don't understand I've stood in worse places than this, with worse men staring down a rifle at me. If they want to fight for our dignity, I'll give them one. But it'll be on my terms. The next few days passed with the weight of tension pressing on every moment. Marcus could feel it in the way neighbors watched from behind curtains, in how the same truck that had idled outside their home now circled the block at night, its headlights sweeping across their yard like a warning. Maya tried to stay strong, but she carried her fear quietly, especially for the children. Marcus knew she was worried he might do something that would tip the balance, something that would confirm the town's whispers that he was dangerous. But he also knew that men like Tom and his friends didn't stop unless they were forced to. On the 4th evening, the trouble arrived. Marcus had just finished tucking the kids into bed when the sound of shattering glass tore through the night. Maya screamed from the kitchen as a brick smashed through the front window, scattering shards across the floor. Marcus was downstairs in seconds, weapon in hand, his instincts flaring. He pushed Maya behind him, scanning the darkness outside. Voices and laughter echoed faintly down the street, the sound of cowards who thought anonymity in the dark would protect them. For a brief moment, Marcus considered storming out, hunting them down, ending this with his own hands. His blood boiled. But then he saw the small faces peeking from the staircase, his children, wide-eyed and trembling. He couldn't just think as a Marine. He had to think as a father. He holstered the pistol and picked up the phone. "It's time they see what happens when a man fights the right way," he told Maya before calling the sheriff. When the deputies arrived, Marcus could tell by their guarded expressions that they had already heard the story, and probably the twisted version of it. But as he stood in his shattered kitchen, glass crunching under his boots, his voice carried the authority of truth. "My wife went into a store to buy bread. The owner told her he doesn't serve her kind. I spoke to him about it. Since then, men have shown up at my house in the middle of the night, threatening me. Now my window been smashed while my children are in this house. You're going to write this down. You're going to file it. Because if you don't and something worse happens, it'll be on your heads." There was something in the way Marcus spoke, calm but unbreakable, that forced the deputies to nod. They took notes, collected the brick, and promised to investigate. But Marcus didn't believe promises. He believed in action. Word of the attack spread quickly. This time, though, the town was divided in a way it hadn't been before. Some people muttered that Marcus should leave before more trouble came, but others began to rally quietly behind him. Harold visited the next morning, standing in the wreck of glass with tears in his eyes. "I never thought I'd live to see someone stand up to them," Harold said. "You've done more than just protect your family, son. You've shown the rest of us we don't have to keep our heads down forever." Soon others came. A young teacher who admitted she'd been afraid to speak out. A mother who whispered that her own son had been bullied for befriending black kids in another town. Even a local veteran, white-haired and limping, who shook Marcus's hand firmly and said, "You served. I served. That makes us brothers. Don't let these fools tell you different." By the week's end, Marcus noticed something change. Tom's store was quieter now, his once loyal customers thinning out. A few brave souls chose instead to shop in the next town over. The sheriff, under pressure from voices he couldn't ignore, made visits to Tom and his friends, warning them that the law was watching. But the biggest change came one late afternoon when Marcus walked downtown with Maya. They entered the bakery, and the owner, a woman who had once stayed silent as others whispered, walked out from behind the counter and said clearly, for everyone to hear, "Your wife is welcome here, always." The words weren't just for Maya. They were for the whole town, a declaration that not everyone agreed with the hatred festering in the shadows. That night, as the family sat together on the porch, the air was finally still. No trucks circled, no bricks flew. The silence wasn't just peace, it was respect, or at least the start of it. Maya leaned her head against Marcus's shoulder. "You didn't just protect us," she whispered. "You changed something." Marcus looked out at the quiet street, his arm around her. Change is slow, hard, sometimes bloody, but it starts with a line you don't let anyone cross, and once it's drawn, you hold it. He knew the fight wasn't over. Not in this town, not in the country, not anywhere ignorance had taken root. But for now, his family was safe, and the community had seen that silence was no longer the only option. The Marine in him had been trained to end enemies. But the man, the husband, the father in him, had chosen something greater, to make sure his family lived not just free of danger but with dignity. And in the small town where one store owner thought he could deny a woman bread and milk, a line had been drawn that would never fade.